Hey everybody, it's the Mad Master here, doing another video. This is not going to be about the current political slash philosophical, sociological situation in the world right now, which, of course, you can expect more videos on that, but I'm trying to branch out from that trap of 2020, as to quote the astrologer Austin Kapak. The trap that is 2020. Don't go to 2020. Anyway, so it was funny because I was thinking about this, and I posted this on Facebook. Like, I remember reading all these interviews with these 90s like grunge and like alternative bands. Oh, the 80s, man. All they wanted to do was, sometimes it was, oh shit, fuck, this low power. Sometimes it was like sometimes there's a criticism about the sex and drugs and rock and roll aspect of the hair bands, or the fantasy shit about the, heavy metal bands like Dungeons and Dragons. But the thing is that some of these bands that criticized the 80s in the night when they were in the 90s, really all they were talking about is like fucking heroin and how they were smacked up and shit. It's like, okay, so is heroin cooler than Dungeons and Dragons? I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, in the long run, is heroin cooler than Dungeons and Dragons or getting laid? It's a question. Is it really cooler? So yeah, those were my thoughts. Like, some of the arrogant smugness of these 90s bands. Like, I have this magazine that is like a guitar. I remember this magazine, Guitar Player. It was a Guitar Player magazine. It was an issue about, is shred dead? And I actually bought it a couple years ago because I read it at if you remember this chain, Walden Books, when I was a kid. I was like, is shred dead? And they interview all these shredders and then grunge rockers of the time. It was like 93 or something like that. This came out. I'm just like, it's ironic because like 10, 15 years later, we knew that shred was not dead. We have like Animals as leaders, and we have fucking all these gent bands doing shred, and these metalcore bands doing shred, and the power prog metal stuff that's still popular to some extent, that's out there too. Or even even a lot of the black metal, death metal, whatever. So shit, we gotta make my new normal. So we know that that's the case now, that was not dead. But at the time, they were really predicting the end of shred, and it was kind of funny. And I bought that magazine. I'm looking for more magazines from that era. Particularly, there's Metal Hammer, a couple issues from Metal Hammer UK that say specifically that the word heavy metal is dead, or metal is dead. Not Rob Halford's proclaimed pronouncement. That was 1997 or 8, I believe. Heavy metal is dead. Ironically, his like only a year later or whatever, he came out with his first solo band album, and then we know that what went from there with the whole revival of metal. So it wasn't dead. But people of that generation, of like late Generation X, early millennials, still have this weird thing about metal. And I meet people that are slightly younger. They really don't give a fuck. Like, there was someone that I was talking to a year or so ago who was like a Generation Z, and they're just like, oh yeah, I like some metal. Like, they don't have this like weird there's not this weird stigma to them about metal, like denying liking metal or listening to metal like some people of that generation has, because it was so fucking pounded in our heads that metal was bad. I mean, first it was heavy metal's evil, literally evil, which I would prefer, actually. I like that. I wish that would come back in a way. Like, okay, I don't wish it would come back because the innocent people that were destroyed by the satanic panic, that sucks. But in a way, like the rebelliousness of the 80s metal, people were burning their records and banning them from shows. Well, we're banned from shows now, of course, because of that virus. But you know, I mean, it was kind of a fun. It was kind of fun to reminisce. I can't talk about that. So that's one thing. That was one thought I had about that. I think a lot of people though have that attitude about metal, even now. Like not younger people, but people that were in this certain period of time, this certain category. Because you talk to younger people, like one of the guitarists in my band was like a lot younger than me, and he was millennial. He was a millennial. He was really good guitarist. He's like, oh yeah, I like all that stuff. Paul Gilbert, John Petrucci. You know, it's like I noticed this. Like it was starting about 15 years ago when people started like turn around about metal. Like there was a definite like discrimination against the word metal and the ideas, and the NU metal was starting to change that. You know, it was one of the some of the collateral damage of like grunge and alternative was that metal was seen as a bad word. Not only hair metal, the good metal was actually, even though I like some hair metal now, but the good metal was the collateral damage of that. So that's why we have, you know, why things died in the mid 90s. Like I said, 1995 was the lowest point for metal in the popular lexicon of everybody, or you know, in popularity, because that's when a lot of bands were just playing clubs at that point. You know, Iron Maiden played a club, you know, early 1996 or 95. You know, they played in the X Factor tour, basically the rave in Milwaukee. It wasn't a club, but it was kind of a bigger club. You know, it wasn't a theater. It was kind of in between club and theater. The stage, I mean. They have a couple stages there, but they played like the medium-sized stage. The next time I saw them, they were at the Eagles Ballroom, which is a lot bigger. And the next time they were at the Milwaukee fucking God, what's it called? Like amphitheater. It was a bigger place, so they played bigger and bigger places each time in the late '90s, early 2000s, because they were getting, you know, metal was on the rise again. But '95 was the worst year, and but yeah, just the, you know, the whole thing is so stupid. It's just like now you'll talk to someone, even the Generation Z, who actually I game with a guy that's Generation Z, or actually a few people that are in the, you know, early 20s demographic, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I like Powerwolf, and then I like Carpenter Brute, but I like Kanye West's last album, or whoever the fuck's popular, you know. It's like, not they don't like Kanye West, but you know, I'm just giving an example of you know, the eclecticness of people now. There are people that have a bad attitude about metal, especially if they were a metalhead at one point, like a certain person that I was with a while back. Unfortunately, she had a weird thing about it, even though she still liked some of it. Then she tried to, I don't want to talk about that, but I don't want to think about that right now. Depressing, but so yeah, people have a weird thing about it. Just say what you like. Fucking, you know, I don't give a fuck anymore, you know. I just don't care. I mean, growing up it was a struggle because I was a metalhead at the peak years, during the peak years of the 90s anti-metal landscape. So who gives a shit? If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. I happen to identify as kind of a metalhead, but that's fine. So, yeah, I mean, that's about all. I mean, as far as these heroin addict losers, I mean, a lot of them. I mean, you know, I love Alice in Chains, and I love a lot of that stuff. I even like Nirvana, believe it or not. Bleach and Incesticide, I think those are the two best works they had, and Nevermind is decent, but you know, it's overplayed. It's like the Black Album. Incesticide's probably my favorite. For some reason, that really resonated with me when it came out. And I bought it on tape when it came out. Fuck. So, even though I was into the grunge thing when it came out, I still look back on some of the ideas these musicians had about, virtuosity of music, and, looking back on just a decade earlier as some kind of outdated shit decade or something. It's just like, fuck you, man. And, particularly there's this Blind Melon interview in Guitar for the Practicing Musician back in the mid 90s or early 90s. And there's like, oh yeah, they were watching all these videos, and I think "Pull Me Under" by Dream Theater came on, and it was like they were saying all this stuff, and the guys were. It sounded like they were almost jealous of the musicianship because they couldn't play that complicated stuff. Fucking, and my brother said a lot of shit about Dream Theater. He's like, oh, they sound like these rich spoiled brats that got to go to music school, and that kind of resonated with me for a while. But he liked Rush a lot though. But yeah, so I think there was a lot of bad stuff in the 90s that the problem is when something becomes so ubiquitous that it pushes anything, even the good things, from what's not popular out. That's the problem. So like I said, the collateral damage of the grunge alternative movement was actual good metal that was out, Metallica cut their hair and they fucking kind of softened their sound even more than on the Black Album. Ugh. Listen to Load, or I've kind of, I kind of liked Reload and Load for a little bit, like a few years back, because I had stayed away for so long from it. And then more recently, like the last couple of years, I'm just like, no, I can't take that. Even the Black Album is kind of, I don't know. I like the sound of the Black Album more than the actual songs. Like the sonics they made were pretty good. If you listen to the radio today and hear a Black Album song, then hear some fucking like Shine Down song or some shit on the solid rock radio, you'll see a stark difference between the sonics, and how good the production is compared to today. This very flat sounding, thin to some extent, crushed, compressed, shitty sound versus very deep and warm and thick and hearty sound of the Black Album. So that's all.